Hello, welcome to TEAS at IETF108 online. I am Lou Berger. We have Vishnu Padban-Buram, my co-chair, online. And I haven't seen if Matt will join us or not, but Matt Hartley is our secretary and he's very helpful behind the scenes. So even if we don't have him, we do appreciate his contribution. Online, we have the agenda. That is the same as what was distributed previously. One change is how we're going to do note taking. We're going to use this new tool. I don't even know how to pronounce it properly. CodeMD, maybe? I don't know. But it's a markdown version of what we used to do with Etherpad. I just sent the link to chat. Please join in and help us capture what happens in this session. It's particularly important if you make comments at the mic to go and check them and then make sure the conversation is appropriately captured. Do this. So this is an IETF meeting, which means that we are covered by our note well. It's the end of the week. People should be familiar with it. It governs what you say here, both in that what you say becomes part of our permanent record as a contribution to the IETF. We also have policies related to how we interact with each other and treating each other with respect. We know we're on Media Echo because if you're hearing this, this is how you're viewing it. We've already talked about note taking and the online agenda. I am trying to watch Jabber, as is my co-chair. We will try to channel anything that anyone would like to say. Just put @mic in front of it if you'd like to ensure that it gets read. Our agenda was as uploaded. It's packed, so we're going to try to keep things moving. I believe we've said this before, but we wanted to reiterate that in this new all online mode of working, it's we want to offer that the working group resources, notably the WebEx, is available for informal meetings. Obviously, we continue to have our mailing list as the way we judge consensus, the way we do our primary business. We also can have virtual interims, and we also have these now informal meetings that are available. All that it takes to get one is to ask the working group chairs, just send a message to the alias, and we'll set that up and announce it on the list. As usual, we follow our IPR process. This isn't new, but we do like reminding folks of that. So what's new in terms of major document status? We have a new RFC. That's always great to see, since that's why we're here. And that covers the Yang data types. Thank you very much to the authors and contributors in the working group for producing that. In the editor queue, we have TE topology. That's a fairly major document. It was an Auth 48. Actually, I saw some mail on it, but I don't think I saw it published. So, but we're getting awfully close on that. We do have one document that's with the ISG right now, and another document which is recently adopted. We've received one liaison and one communication. The liaison is from 3GPP and is related to their work and slicing and and discussion of network slicing. So this is obviously highly relevant to our network slicing discussions. And there is a request for a response on this. And I think it makes sense for maybe to ask the design team for a response, but really the response is from the working group. So we will get together a draft on that. It'll be sent to the list and go from and we'll go from there to ensure that we have working group consensus before sending that. We've also received a communication from the GSM Alliance. By the way, the difference between a liaison and a communication is a liaison is something we have a formal relationship established by the IAB with that organization. A communication is we don't have that formal liaison. And I believe this group is actually going to talk to the IAB about potentially establishing a liaison, but will be driven from them. So they've sent out a liaison to both 3GPP and the IETF with specific requests. They are not asking for a response, but they do identify future meetings. I take that as an implicit invitation. Don't really know if that's the case, but that's what was in the communication. The communication is on the email list. The liaison is in our formal liaison tracker. So if you're interested in them, please take a look. That's what I have for the admin slides. We're going to go off to working group status slides. Hold on.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon and good evening. I'm Pawan Biram, the other co-chair. I hope everyone is doing great. I will be spending the next few minutes going over the status of the working group documents. We do have a packed agenda, so I'll try and keep it as terse as I can. Can you go to the next slide? So there are 20 working group documents listed here. 4 of those marked in blue are on the agenda today. There is the one in red, for which we put in a publication request sometime in recent weeks. The status for each of the remaining 15 documents is covered in this deck. I will not go through each and every one of those, but I'll highlight a few things. The modeling drafts for T and RSVP and L3 and SR topology augments, they're all nearing completion. Some of them are more closer to the finish line than the others. Tom Petch has been diligently reviewing each of these. Much thanks to him for his work. The authors have been making sure that each of his comments are getting addressed. Yesterday. The other modeling draft listed here is the SF-aware topology modeling draft. This is also almost done, except for a couple of comments from Tom that needs to get addressed. There is an individual draft in the ops area working group that talks about a model for universal CPE, and that references the SF-aware topo work. So the authors have said that they would keep close watch on how that work progresses. I'd like to touch upon a few select documents and then I'll wrap it up. Can we go to slide 4? This is the enhanced VPN framework document. The authors have done a reasonable number of edits in the latest revision of this document. One significant edit was to do with culling out the section that talked about how enhanced VPN can be delivered in the ACTN architecture. The authors have indicated that this would now be covered in detail in other documents, but it's not clear how and what the plans are with regards to it. There is a reference to some work that hasn't been adopted yet. I would like to request the authors, if they are present, to elaborate on that. And also in the meantime, ask the working group to review these changes, as these are significant edits. Anybody from the set of authors would like to chime in? Is G here? G, go ahead.
And then we lost him. Adrian was here, and then we lost him.
Can
Right, Adrian's back.
Adrian, go ahead.
You have the floor.
So I'm not sure you can hear me because my mic symbol's not showing.
We hear you.
We can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I can only speak as a contributing author a little bit along the way, but the Draft King TEAS applicability ACTN slicing just got respawned with quite a lot of new work in it, and that is looking broadly at the applicability of ACTN to network slicing, and therefore enhanced VPN is subsumed in that as well. So I don't think that document's quite cooked, but if the working group is interested in that topic, then that would be a fine thing to adopt and move on with.
Okay. G, I see you sending a request.
Nope.
You should be able
G, go ahead.
to speak and then Eric after.
Okay. This change is mainly because we noticed that in the design team, non-spawn interface and the service models will be a next step work, and there are also several drafts on this topic. So we think this part may be better covered in the other draft documents, and we can simply reference some of these documents in this draft. That is our plan with this change.
Okay.
Eric, if it's
Eric?
Yeah, can people hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I just want to address something that Adrian said. I think that the new draft that he's talking about, the ACTN applicability to network slicing draft, does have some general applicability, but it's not really as broad as he says, since it is limited to ACTN TE aspects, so that technologies that are not visibly reliant on TE will not necessarily use this this applicability directly. I know that it is good material, and we plan to look at it in the network slicing design team as possibly being a reference for our own ACTN applicability to transport slicing. But we don't think that it is as general as Adrian's comment may have made it sound.
Okay. So yeah, we would like to see this aspect get discussed on the list, and in the interest of time, I think we can move on. Can you quickly go to slide 8?
One additional comment. I think this highlights sort of the tension between working group and individual documents. If something's a working group document, you really can't extract it and put it in an individual document without discussion with the working group. And it's fine to flag it and say, hey, we think it belongs in an individual document, but the working group controls the content of a working group document, while individuals control the content of an individual, and it's not accepted yet. So there's a tension there. Please, in the future, just flag it. Make sure you discuss it on the list, as Pavan's saying. Don't just remove it, though.
Okay. Can you go to slide 8? Yeah, so this is the new work that we adopted. Much thanks to Adrian and everyone else who were instrumental in getting this to this stage. It's a big effort, and thanks for all your efforts. There was some brief discussion on the list on what constitutes full-fledged TE and what really entails partial TE. So this discussion is really important for us in order to categorize other TE-ish work that's being done in other working groups. Say, for example, traffic steering via SAP policies or tree engineering via BEER. So if you do have any opinion on this, please do chime in on the thread. I mean, it was a fairly brief discussion on the mailing list, but I'd like to see more opinions come in. That's all I had to say on this slide. The last slide, can you go to slide 9? This is the RSVP RMR document. This was in expired state for quite some time. The authors just revived this, and the promise is that they would reassess the next steps for this after the base MPLS RMR document, which is kind of stuck in the ISG process, gets going. We will reassess the fate of this after that goes through. I'll stop here. You can go over the remaining slides by yourselves. Are there any questions on the status of the working group documents before we move on to the next presentation? Okay, let's get to the next presentation. Is that Sergio? Yeah. Sergio, you got on the queue and you disappeared.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, fine. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening for everybody. My name is Sergio Bellotti. I'm going to present update regarding YAG model for requesting path computation on behalf of authors and contributors. Next slide, please. So this is the summary of the changes that we made from versions 7. So we try to address the basic, the main principle, the main comments that we received, and that is related to the path computation for protected path. That is an item that was discussed from IETF108-TEAS-20200731-1100, and the path computation for bidirectional path. The add-on of errors in case path computation fails, and we obtained that with in collaboration with Tunnel Model, and Tunnel Model will add in the list some specific error for to support this feature, and multi-layer path computation. We addressed comments from working group, so thanks in particular to Hao Yan, Yang Lei, and Tom for their valuable comments. In the draft, the basic updated section are the 5.3 and 5.4. Next slide, please. So this is the basic modification in the YAG. So to address the bidirectional and path propagation case, we exploit on the fact that okay, the YAG model that is providing the path computation allow including multiple requests for different path, and this path can be intended to be used in the same tunnel or in the different tunnel. We introduced a list, a new list of the tunnel attributes, in which we collapse all the tunnel attributes that can be referred to avoid that repetition in case multiple requests for the same tunnel has to be considered. So we introduced this list, and we introduced a choice in which, in case you use the reference case, you can take into account the request in case of existing tunnel, when, for example, computing protection path, and to add the protection in case of an existing tunnel, or in case the tunnel is not already instantiated, an entry to the new tunnel attributes that I mentioned before. Moreover, the reference part introduce also the capability to support information regarding the role and the direction of the path that is requested within the tunnel. So primary or secondary, and the forward and the reverse direction. Next slide, please. The other part of the choice is related to the value, and this is considered the case in which there is no need to associate multiple path requests, and so it is an explicit list of attributes. So the server has in this way all the information related to know how to create that tunnel within the operational data store. And this is there was a strict alignment with tunnel model, and thanks tunnel guys that help us in this topic. Next slide, please. We introduce also the support for the multi-layer path computation. Also in this case, we adopt the same concept of dependency tunnel that is proposed in the tunnel model. And there is a differentiation in the update of the Yang in case the dependency tunnel is already present in the data store, or can be an entry in the tunnel attribute list, for which we have the name and the leaf ref related to the list of the tunnel attributes. Moreover, as in the tunnel model, is needed to the server layer tunnel has to provide the information related to the hierarchical link, the dynamic link that this server tunnel is going to support in the client layer. Next slide, please. The open issue status, we have the usual GitHub repository. We have still open 9 issue, but only 5 are specific for path computation. So the other 4 we need to have a collaboration with tunnel model, because is something that is also related to the tunnel. And so we have one pending feedback from young expert related to the 76. We have 2 editorial issue and 2 pending that is related more of the stability of the young model, because is related to the security part, and to introduce an example, a conclusive example of path computation. Next slide, please. There is we introduced a new open issue that was coming from when we compile the Yang, the update Yang. So the problem is that the question is that how to specify the leaf ref within the RPC, because what happened is that when we compile with Pyang 1.7.5 with considering in the XPath also the input of the RPC, the compilation is good, but it fails with Pyang 2.1. and if we compile with pyang 2.1 without the part of input, is compiling with 2.1 but is not compiling with 1.7.5. Next slide, please. A second issue is how to condition the data definition in the RPCC output based on RPC input. So we have a case here in this augmentation, and we have this when, in which also here we have in the X part the input, and in this case the pyang is compiling only with 1.7.5, but not with the pyang 2.1. So we ask, we put the open issue in the GitHub, and we ask young doctor suggestion for that. Next slide, please.
Unmute. This is Lou. Have you talked to the author Yang or reported this and seen what they've said?
To whom? Sorry, Lou.
I think it's Martin who wrote Pyang. I don't remember who wrote it, but the authors of the tool.
Not directly. We put the question, yeah, in the issue of GitHub, but no, we have.
I'm sorry.
Not,
which GitHub?
Our GitHub.
Thank you. You might want to talk to the tool authors. They're helpful and will help you even with your Yang.
Okay. For the next step, we think the addressing the last comments and extension suggestion for new feature, the draft is stable enough, and we think we are ready for young doctor review. Okay, we need to resolve the open issue that I mentioned before, and in particular we need cooperation with the tunnel model authors, and we have planned for working group last call after IETF109, obviously depending of also of the feedback from young doctors. Thanks.
Are you asking for Yang doctor review now or after you resolve the open issues?
We think that we can already enough stable to ask young doctor review.
Okay, I will.
It seems like for some of the open issues, you do need inputs from the young doctors, right? I guess.
Not the open issue that are there in this moment.
Okay.
All right, thank you. I think we're ready to move on to the next.
Drew? Drew, are you on?
So hi folks, I'll be covering three drafts. These are all Yang model drafts, all working group drafts. So let's go to the next slide, and I will try to do them quick. So the three Yang models that we have is the VN Yang model, the augmentation of VN and TE Yang model with the KPI telemetry, and the third set is the service mapping, where we have a common type and various augmentations to the service model, and the new update, which is the augmentations to the network model. Next slide, where we'll start with the VN Yang update. Next slide. So a VN basically is the customer view of our network. It uses the T topology model, the abstract node and the connectivity matrix concept of the T topology model. So it's an abstraction over the other T model with a customer view. Next slide. So let's focus on the updates that were made recently. So the updates were, we changed the type def for all the identifiers that we were using in our document. We were using UN32 before. We changed them to INET URI, mainly by looking at RFC 8345, which is the network YANG model, where it uses INET URI. So we prefer to use the same thing, and we made the change. There was one comment regarding this on the list. We checked with the authors. The authors said that this is a good practice. So we are looking for feedback from implementers and other people as well, whether this seems to be a problem for anyone or whether they are happy with this change. The another comment that we got was from Kenichi Ogaki regarding the adding max bandwidth in the VNAP structure as well, which is something which is quite aligned with the table that we have in our ACTN framework document, RFC 8453. So we have accepted this, and this has already been added. We have removed one grouping that we had for path disjoint, which we were redefining. There was no need for us to redefine. This already exists in the T types, so we have done that change. In an appendix, we have added a small description on how to set our constraints when using the VN, because that's a worry that many people had. So we have something to point people to on how to do it. We would like to thank Tom Petch for giving us various YANG comments on how to fix. So we have done that. Even after that, we have something pending. So we will get on to them very, very quickly. So one more thing would be next slide, which is this another suggested change that we have from the KDDI folks. So they provided us a requirement that they have difficulty using the VN Compute RPC right now. The main issue is that since we are dependent on the T topology and connectivity matrix, to do this VN Compute, they have to do it in two steps. They have to first call the T topology model, create an abstract topology, set the constraints there, and then call VN Compute RPC. So this, they feel for them, this was becoming a problem, and they were asking us, is there a better way to do that where they can get the VN Compute result, especially when they are doing testing and they are probing the network, whether they can do it via a single RPC. So to satisfy this, it's pretty easy to do. We can optionally add two groupings which already exist in the T types RFCs, which is generic path constraints and generic path optimization, as a part of VN Compute, where optionally they can provide us this information directly in the VN Compute itself. And we think, as authors discussed with them, and we feel that this is a reasonable request, we would like to know from the working group whether there is any objection on this. And next slide. Next slide just shows the same thing in a pictorial format of what the issue is and why they would like to prefer to do it in a single RPC. And this is the end for VN YANG update. If there is any question for VN YANG, we can take it now. And otherwise, we can move to the next. Is that okay with the chairs? That we do it questions one after the other, or you prefer I finish all three?
You can do it any way you want. It's your time. And if you want, we can also have a discussion on the list. Certainly like this is it's perfectly reasonable to send comments to the list.
Yeah, that's always welcome. So if there is no one who's rushing to the mic queue, I'll move on. So the next document is the KPI telemetry YANG model. Next slide, please. So this YANG model is basically adding performance monitoring telemetry structure by augmenting the T-tunnel model and the VN model. So these are the two YANG that you see on your screen. And customer will subscribe to these telemetry using the existing mechanisms. And we also have a scaling intent. This is something new which has been added in the document. It's been there for a while. So this is just a quick summary. So the updates that we have, next slide, would be mainly doing editorial changes and fixing the requirement language in the draft, updating the prefix and reference table. Again, thank you, Tom Petch, for pointing these things out. So we have fixed these. We have one comment pending, which was sent by Greg. This was regarding, since at the VN level, we are aggregating the telemetry data. So we have to put a clear reference on what is our methodology of how we are doing this aggregation. So this will apply to, especially at the VN level, what is the methodology we are using to aggregate our telemetry data. So this we have not yet handled. I'm looking for feedback from folks who have done that in other Yangs, and whether we have good reference and a technique to describe it, whether it should be added clearly in a description or whether just a reference is enough. So even from Greg, I will continue to discuss. And if other people have thoughts on this, please reach out to me or on the mailing list. This is still pending. This we need to resolve. That's it for this document. Any comments from folks or any suggestion on this? Okay, let's move to the last one. This is the TE service mapping Yang model. This one had a little bit bigger change compared to the other Yang model. This is our mapping model, which maintains a mapping between the service models L3SM, L2SM, L1CSM with our TE models at various different granularities, at VN level, at the topology level, at the tunnel level, etc. So any level, it's able to do this mapping. This mapping facilitates for easy service operations. So you can just focus on the service and what is the underlay TE network visibility we can provide. Even we can do, by having different map types, we can control what is the relationship between the underlying TE, whether it is shared across services, whether it is reserved for one, etc. So this also allows for very easy monitoring and diagnostic of the TE part of our services. Next slide. So the main change is we had the request. This was being discussed in the ops area working group as well as on the TEAS earlier, and we discussed this in the last meeting as well, where what about mapping from network model to our TE resources? And since we have this common type, which is well defined, it can easily be used. So that's what we have done in this update as well. We have augmented the L3NM model and L2NM model as well with the same mapping, and they can also maintain a reference to our TE information. And this is done with discussion with the authors in the ops area working group, the L3NM and L2NM authors. Next slide. Another request that we had was something like a TE mapping template. When we need to map to the TE constraints and optimization criteria without actually having the TE underlay TE already established. So in this case, when the customer wants to provide the service Yang, they have the idea of what is the TE constraints they have, but they do not know what is the underlying TE because it might not have established right now. So they would still want to use our mapping model to do that. So this requirement came from operators and made quite a bit of sense. This is a similar requirement that you saw in the previous presentation as well, where we want to do path computation and referring to constraints without having to set those tunnels, create those tunnels in the system first. So the idea here is that in our common data structure, we can maintain these constraints and optimization criteria. And like any other mapping, we could also map to this template. And once the resources are actually reserved in the network and the TE tunnel or TE VN is actually created, at that time we can do the mapping. Next slide. So this is my last slide. So don't worry. So what we have, other things that we have done is we had also a requirement that just not map to TE tunnel, also should have a mapping to SR policy. So that has been added. And we thank the contribution from Oscar, Anton, and Samir, who provided us information regarding L3NM SR policy, as well as this new requirement for template. I'm open to questions. Tariq is in the queue.
Okay, this is Tariq from with Juniper Networks. Dhruv, I have a question about the constraints template. Is the intention to have a stateful request? You set your constraint, and these are give me the path whenever it changes, notify me as well, or this is a stateless.
This is just what are my optimization and constraints criteria. You are not even mentioning what the endpoints are here. So it's nothing to do with the path calculation here. It is just what are my common constraints that I care about. That's all.
Okay, just defining the constraints themselves.
Yeah.
Or modeling them.
Yeah. And using the T types thing, not creating them again. Just using what's already exists.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, this is Daniele. Just wanted to add a very, very small bit of information on what Dhruv excellently explained in a very, very good way. I mean, this is a requirement that comes from the OSS layer. The fact that in many cases the service orchestrator doesn't care about the fact that a given VPN is bounded to a given T tunnel. In many cases, they just want to have a layer 3 VPN with given characteristics. And so the need to add this sort of, let me call it a wild card. I don't want a T tunnel, a VPN to use a given T tunnel, but I want a VPN with given characteristics between endpoints.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thanks to you.
The right version? Reza, please enter the queue.
Yeah, and this is Yari also. I thought I would spend 30 seconds introducing the two pieces of work ahead of you before letting Reza and Eric talk about the draft. So the design team has worked on two things, the definitions and the framework based on the good feedback from the working group. And I think we heard comments from the working group. We took them to heart, and hopefully the drafts are much improved. Not perfect. Please give feedback and make your suggestions. I think there's things to fix. Just for background, the design team has worked quite a lot, in particular on two aspects. First off, we believe less is more. So this version or these versions are actually trying to be like a minimalistic frameworks that they cover some aspects or some characteristics that one might wish to have for one's slices or connections. Things that the customers can request. It doesn't cover everything. Things can be extended, but it's been problematic to sort of try and cover everybody's favorite things. And so rather take this minimalistic approach. And the second issue that we've worked quite a bit on is sort of clear separation between requirements. The customer asks for these characteristics for the connections, and then the way that gets realized or implemented. And that shows up in particular with the context of isolation and the terminology around that. And the current draft tries to make it clear that you have some requirements that typically about like, we want this bandwidth. You can implement this in various different ways. The draft has an appendix that talks about the isolation, different ways to implement isolation, for instance. but it's separate from the requirements. So with that, I think Reza, you can go ahead.
Hello everyone, can you hear me? Hello everyone, can you hear me?
I can hear you, I believe.
Okay, hello, my name is Reza. On behalf of my co-author, Shunsake, Kiran, Luis, and Jeff, and also all NSTT, I'm going to present IETF draft definition for transfer slice. Go to the second slide, please. This is the first draft in NSTT. We started with the definition of the transfer slice. From the very high level, we defined the transfer slice to be a group of connection between various endpoints with a specific SLO that we want. So this is from high level. In the draft, we went through detail of that. What does it exactly mean? It's presented in the last IETF107. And basically the topics that discussed during that discussion was the whole draft, definition of the draft, what is the service level objective that we want to have for the transfer slice, various terminology characteristics. We discussed about the transfer slice controller and interface to that from the northbound NBI, from the southbound, and in a specific NBI. And also how we put an example at the very end that how a transfer slice fit in the ecosystem of the end-to-end network slice. This was very good, the basic introduction to just give a context of where the transfer slice fits in the overall end-to-end network slice. So if you go to the next slide, these are the changes. It's coming, I guess. These are the changes from 107. It is very important to consider that the existing draft that you will see is basically the work of around 15-20 people for last 3 months. So we had weekly meeting between co-authors. We had the weekly meeting between the all NSTT. We spent lots of time going through the emails and the discussion. And basically, whatever you see is a byproduct of that, all those discussions. We try to consider all the suggestions that we get from the previous one. There was Joel, Adrian, other people basically given the comment. For example, we add RFC's draft references to the existing draft. Why we are using transfer slice term, what is the meaning of the transfer in this context, all are added, and we try to give the reference. In addition to that, there were lots of discussion during the NSTT meeting about the objective SLOs. So we went at the very end, defined a group of minimal set of the objectives, which are directly measurable, like a bandwidth, latency, so on. Indirectly measurable, like security, restriction for geographical location, and so on. And other objectives that it's not really neither nor. We want to have some characteristics which are optional. We want to have some MTUs. We want to have some implementation of the transfer slice using various techniques, technology. Those are obviously optional. And last but not least, we added we had lots of discussion about isolation. In a specific, this topic, I remember we discussed it at least for a few weeks, and eventually we moved that one to the appendix. It's a kind of realization, if, as also Yari mentioned at the very beginning of this meeting, that we feel that isolation, like any other objective, are a way of realizing a transfer slice. A customer send a request to us to create a transfer slice, and when we want to realize it in the network, implement it in the network, the isolation will come to that picture from that aspect. So we move everything to appendix. We add all the comments, all the feedback that we've got. And basically, this is the status of the draft so far. If you go to the next one, this is up to the SLO section. We also added a section about the transfer slice endpoint. There are lots of questions about what is exactly transfer slice endpoint, and what is the relationship or differences between that one and existing, for example, access point, which is defined in RFC 8453. What is the relationship between that and TE-link termination points, and also similarity between that and termination points, which is defined in 8345. We basically clarify all this. If you go to the draft, you will see that we put the logical reasons why we are introducing that, what are the differences and similarities, and also we introduce a new concept of the transfer/slice realization endpoint. We are still working on that one, but this is basically this section is completely rewritten to clarify what it means and basically address the question that we've got during the last 3 months. If you go to the next slide, these are some other changes that happened in this draft. We had lots of cleanup for the characteristic section, for example. I mentioned that one, clarified the term transport, RFC. So most of them are already discussed. But we also improved the northbound and southbound interface the section, that what it really means and how it relates to the characteristic of these two, and eventually when we go to the, for example, the Yang model for NBI and so on, we have a clarity in this document that what are the characteristics. What is coming next, what is the ongoing discussion that we have at this point here is, no, it's still the previous one, the last section of the last slide. The ongoing discussion that we have here is basically the appendix that we have. We want to see if it is needed to move this one to the framework document, to the draft that we have. Eric is going to talk about it most likely. The ongoing discussion about transfer slice endpoint. And at this point, whatever we are requesting based on whatever I mentioned, we reached to a level of maturity for this draft collectively on from the NSTT perspective, that we feel that we are ready for adoption. Although there are some ongoing discussion, as I said, that we are going to, go through that. And we seeking review comments, and the draft, the very latest one is all the time in GitHub. I put the GitHub there. You can take a look. And basically that concludes the discussion. If there is any question or comment, please. I don't see anybody in the queue.
Yeah, thank you, Reza. And definitely discuss this on the list and take a look at it and expect an adoption call.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Can people hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Great. Fantastic. So let's go to the next slide. Next slide, please. As you can see, there's 2 editors and then the entire design team, and then we've got a lot of input from everybody. We presented the status actually not at IETF 107, but the interim in April 23rd, I think it was. I'm not sure. No one had any questions at that time, but we have had some changes that ripple through, and so the presentation in the interim meeting information is right there. The current summary is it's not requirements or architecture; it's a framework. I think most people know what a framework is, but basically the intention of the framework document is to describe the background and some of the objectives at a high level. So the idea here is an implementation / technology agnostic transfer slice. Brief description of the draft contents included and the proposed next steps. We postponed adoption because both the definition draft and and the framework drafts sort of need to be adopted together. And we had some objections to doing that at the interim meeting. Next slide, please. Okay, changes this time. So the editorial changes, some minor abstract table of contents introduction changes. Did some capitalization consistency improvements for transport slice, telemetry, statistics, states, etc. Consistent with the definitions draft as well. So a lot of the same changes, or at least that we're trying to be consistent between the two. Punctuation and usage corrections. There's a couple of places where there was text that just was hanging around, or there was issues with punctuation. There was a paste error. I actually included the same reference twice, and in one place it was actually the numbers were transposed, and so we had to correct that, and remove vestigial or redundant text, and then we had to do the, of course, we use the make process in GitHub, and so the usual reference updates were done without our explicit interference. So then we also clarified the somewhat limited applicability of ACTN to generic transport slices. There was a lot of iterative discussion about this. It went on for weeks. It's sort of lower background discussion than other topics, but it did actually go on. We had to deal with the interpretation of the roles in ACTN as they relate to the transport slice controller and the northbound interface, and to a lesser extent to other concepts that we deal with in the definitions draft. And there may not actually be in scope for the rest of the work, like the southbound interface and the PNC and so on. So there was many ways that you can interpret the architecture for ACTN. It's kind of flexible, and it turns out that if you combine things in such a way as to hide the interfaces and the control functions that are defined in our document, it's not particularly applicable. So the applicable interpretation is one where the MDSC more or less maps to the transport slice controller, and the CNC more or less maps to the higher level function that is the consumer of network slices or transport slices. And so other roles where there's overlap in the roles, it kind of make the applicability somewhat questionable. And so we kind of deal with that in the text in the applicability section. And then we also clarified that this is one potential interpretation of the ACTN architecture or description or whatever you want to call it. And so next screen, please. Next slide. So currently pending changes, we got last minute comments from at least one of the design team members. And there's also discussion that's ongoing really regarding some other things. So what we need to do is clarify the role of the NBI as a new interface. We had used, unfortunately, a bad word, and that was concrete. The NBI discussion in the framework document will obviously not be defining an NBI. So, but we do need to make it clear that it is intention of this work that in addition to the transport slice controller, the northbound interface would be defined. We also need to provide an earlier introduction of service level objectives and corresponding terminology. There was some discussion of isolation that was like, VPN isolation and data, separation of data and stuff like that, which didn't really fit well with where we've gone with the isolation topic in the definitions draft that needs to be fixed. Then there's this, currently we use transport slice consumer, or we use consumer or slice consumer or whatever. We need to be consistent about that. And we have some inconsistency between this document and the definitions document in terms of use of consumer versus customer. We had made the decision in recent meetings that we would consistently use transport slice consumer to get rid of any ambiguity and to have the consistency. Then we have to prove the comparison figure in the ACTN applicability by removing the ambiguous customer. All right, so what we would probably do, instead of saying a higher level system, we would say the transport slice consumer. And refer to transport slices instead of transport slice services. Services is sort of implied. We want to use transport slices consistently, so that needs to be fixed. We need some text to resolve some other issues, like network structure and topology. There's some confusion of using one term or the other term in different places, so we need to kind of clean that up. We need to resolve issues with references for existing technology and objections to related references to the VPN, repeated references to the VPN plus draft, the enhanced VPN draft. And there's a section heading which it's been suggested that we use objective rather than intent. The issue is that, and this kind of relates to the earlier comment about bringing in the definition of service level objective a little earlier, is that we're not defining service level objectives in this section. What we're trying to talk about is what it is that the transport slice consumer would be asking for. So we want to be careful about not confusing objective and intent, but we have to have something clearer. And then we also have to resolve a potential discussion of SBI. In the framework document, in the framework draft, we look at the southbound interface as being out of scope for this work. That doesn't mean we don't need to have some description of it. We have it in the definitions draft. It's sort of a logical concept, but there's physical instances of a southbound interface, the L2 SM, the L3 SM, and some others. And there's some applicability statements that are out there that related to like ACTN and POI and ACTN and traffic engineering that are specific to technologies that might correspond, for example, in the ACTN model as the PNC, and would be out of scope for the work, but need to be sort of described and in order to sort of fill in some blanks. And then we need to sync potential changes in to the figures, figure 1 in this draft and figure 4 in the definitions draft, where we want to sort of combine the notion of this customer and transport slice consumer. The figure has already been thrown out there, but we sort of need to coordinate the change so that we don't have this massive inconsistency between the documents. Next slide, please. Okay, discussion of ACTN applicability. There's a resurrected draft that specifically addresses applicability of ACTN to TE network slicing. I kind of mentioned this earlier. It's a draft King TIAS applicability ACTN slicing. Version 4 expired April 2019. New version 5 and 6 were posted in June and July of this year. So they weren't on our radar, but we need to actually sort of factor them in. So this draft outlines ACTN applicability specifically for TE networks using IETF technology, which is right. It's good, but it sort of then becomes technology specific, and so sort of falls into the out of scope. But we need to talk about it again, as I mentioned about the other technology specific stuff. We need to talk about it, and so we should probably include a reference in our ACTN applicability document section, and then maybe we can eliminate some of what we have in there now. Next slide, please. So next steps, like with the other document, is request a working group adoption. then get working group review and comments. And you can see the draft posted at the IETF data tracker repository. The current posted version is -04. If you want to look at GitHub, we're working on -05, obviously, since 04 has already been published. So it'll be there as well in GitHub. So I believe that's the last slide. Next slide, please, if there is one. Looks like that was, it looks like there's another slide, but it's probably just a, end slide. In any case, any questions?
Sorry. There we go. Even though it says there's 6, it won't let me go there.
Yeah, okay. All right, so any questions? Did you want to open the floor to questions on both of the drafts at this point, Lou?
So we have 2 people in the queue, so I think we're ready for them. I didn't see who came in first. Why don't we go with Reza?
Sure.
I just wanted to remove it from the queue. I cannot do it, so I go with Daniel. Go ahead, Daniel. It's in the next.
Thanks. So, two comments. The first one on the interpretation, on the possible interpretations of ACTN. You got a very, very good point here. Consumer versus customer. In ACTN, we defined the interface between the CNC and the MDSC as a boundary between the customer and the operator. In my opinion, not an happy decision, because we are now lacking an interface or let me say an attachment point between an higher level of operations in the operator's network and the transport. So you're perfectly right in speaking about the consumer as opposed to customer. This is something that we would like to fix. Probably with the POI team, we are trying to identify a new interface, or better, a different declination of the CMI that can be used between, for example, the OSS team and the transport team within the operator, as opposed to the customer talking to the operator. And this is very good that you spot this limitation. On the MDSC role, I perfectly agree with the interpretation. I mean, it's the core essence here. It's what the 3GPP calls the NSSMF, the transport part of the management function. And then one comment on how I would, let me say, ask for a network slice in an ACTN context. Actually, the new tools that we added to the young models that Drew presented were, let me say, targeting this issue. Basically, from the consumer point of view, you could request for example, a layer 3 VPN using the L3NM model, map it against either a specific tunnel, or use this sort of a wild card that we are defining to request for a service with given characteristics. This could be an applicability of existing ACTN tools to create a network slice. Just food for thought.
Okay. Might be good to repeat that on list in email, or make sure that it's captured well in the minutes, because there was a lot there.
Okay.
Yeah, mostly positive.
Right. But still, there's a lot there.
I tend to be verbose, sorry.
No worries. We like comments. Eric, you're requesting that adoption, or the authors say that they're ready for adoption. Is that correct? Even with the plan
for
changes?
both of the documents, both the definition draft and the framework draft.
Great. I just put this in Jabber. We'd like to hear from anyone who objects to adoption. Give them a moment to come to the queue. All right, well, we'll take it to the list and look for support and objections on the list. So with that, thank you very much.
Excellent, thank you.
All right, so we are now moving into a set of 5 individual drafts. I had originally thought to just drop the last one, but I don't think that's fair since they're all individual, or I should say, Pavan suggests it's not fair, and we agreed that we're going to try to split the remaining time. So please try to keep to 5 minutes each. Shufang?
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm Xifeng Liu from Water Networks. I'm trying to present the network model, transport slicing data model. So this draft was initially presented in Singapore, and this is a updated version on that. So can we go to the next slide, please? Right, so we're talking about the model here, and this is the model trying to use the existing IETF network topology models. We already have a set of models, including the base 8345 base network topology model, and based on that, we have layer 2, layer 3 TE on top of that. And so please go to the next slide. Then we will plan to add a new model, which is for the slicing at the very right. So can we go to the next slide? So here, the way we model this, we'll use the existing models, and we make the slicing model multiple inheritance model. So we mark this model as a type network slicing, and whenever a particular technology is applicable, so we will have that topology type also. So in this case, we can have both slicing and the TE. Next slide, please. Right, so we can even make it more sophisticated and more complicated. So we can even including some existing model features like layer 3 topology parameters, and even with some packet extensions add to the slicing if we need to. Next slide, please. So we have been working on the ACTN model in this working group for a while. We have a set of models. So they are all based on the network topology model. Since we are augmenting the base topology model and we have multiple inheritance. So whenever we need to have the ACTN make it slicing capable, and we can also set the ACTN model with the slicing flag, and we can reuse all the models we have from ACTN. Next slide, please. So here we have 2 examples. One example here, we are using the virtualization to achieve the slicing. And so the network slicing, now we're trying to realign the terminology once the slicing definition model is finalized. So the slicing model can be either TE capable or non-TE capable. In this case, we use a virtualization technology, which is not TE based. And so we have a physical router. On top of the physical router, we can do the virtualization. Each physical router will have a few virtualized virtual router, and on top of the virtual router, we can have a slice. In this case, we'll have blue, which each node mapped to a virtual router, and again, mapped to the very low level physical router. Next slide, please. So once we got that, in this particular example, the BSS on top of us can set including the customer side doing a layer 2 VPN. On top of the slice, we will have the layer 2 VPN set up. We can have a normal PE and the protocols set up there. So the link between R1 and R2 are IP MPLS, and we can have a protocol like BGP configured on PE. And in this case, this is a layer 2 VPN, and the connection between net company sites and the sliding R1 R3 will be Ethernet packets. So it will be Ethernet switching type and Ethernet encoding type. And between the virtual routers, we'll have an IP MPLS. So all the way can implement this, achieve this through the hardware, the physical router. Next slide, please. So another case will be totally logical. That's what we have been doing.
You're over time.
Okay. So probably I skip this, and this is the way we doing purely virtual, and the case will be IP over OTN with the logical, the LSP, so tunnel. And then after this, we'll have the model details. What do we add to the current topology model? Very few parameters. Next slide. And then we'll also include a detailed configuration data example in the draft. So we can see exactly how the model is used and achieved the slicing.
And the slicing here is augmentation to existing models, correct?
Yes, yes.
So you're not showing anything you're proposing here, you're just showing how you're augmenting the existing model.
We have the augmentation is a separate model, so that's a new model. Yeah, and so yeah, we go to the end probably.
Probably time to wrap up.
Right. So here is a configuration data and the data example. So whenever we have been talking about the definitions and the frameworks, once they are all finalized within the working group, we'll align to all those documents. And then we welcome reviews and suggestions. So next step also will be working group adoption. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're going to hold questions after the next one, assuming we have a little time, because they both are covering the same domain. Please go ahead.
Yes. Hello, can you hear me? Yes.
Hello?
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, now we do.
Okay.
A little low, but we hear you.
Okay. I will
perfect. Go ahead.
A little louder. Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm here to present a YANG data model for transfer slice northbound interface. I'm just on behalf of all the other authors. Next slide, please. This draft has been presented in the last IETF meeting, and in last meeting we received several comments about our new model and why there is a new model for transfer slice NBI interface. So we added a appendix to do the comparison to whether this new model has been proposed. And we will also update this model since last meeting to make sync up with the transport slice definition draft, since this model is designed to be consistent with the transport slice definition draft. So you can on the figure on the left, right, you can see our the client view, the customer view of the transport slice is. They have the two transport slices here, like the blue one and the red one. Next, please. Since just like Shufeng just also talk about the 8345 augmented network model, we also think in our draft, we also give a comparison with some candidate transport slice model definition, since there's a mapping in the transport slice framework draft with current ACTN framework and also the transport slice architecture. So that's the transport slice northbound interface is a similar interface between like ACTN CMI and MSDC like controller interface. So we are thinking, since transport slice interface is a quite abstract model, so we are thinking the ACTN or the network model could be compared. But we're thinking that this transport slice model is quite a customer view model, and they don't talk about network detail. So we were thinking Shufeng's model more related with transport slice realization model. And we also borrow some, and VM model is more TE specific. So we are thinking we try to borrow some modeling design method from the ACTN VM model and create this new model. Next, please.
Modifying that model?
This is a new model.
Did you?
Yeah, this is a new model, and here is the picture show the simplified this model structure, the Yang structure of this model. We directly use like transport slice definition and TS transport slice endpoint definition from the definition draft, but we introduce two TS member and SL group to implement like multiple SLO in a one transport slice, and also for monitoring the transport slice status. So these are next, please. And during the designing, our authors, there's a lot of discussion about how to modeling this transport slice MBI. So we have some open issues. I will not go into detail of this, but I can show you each one just quickly. Please go next, please.
Of time, so maybe just go to your.
I just go quickly of each slide. Then I go. Yes, this is like has a multiple SO for per slice. And next one. There could be some bandwidth definition for transport slice. We propose also like transport slice endpoint bandwidth. Next, please. And there are also we define TS member based on TSE based telemetry in this model. So this is a model that combined with all the function, not only for the configuration, but also monitoring. So next, please. Oh, yeah. And also there are another one because right now the transfer slice is more with the the technology agnostic definition, but we think there may be some technology specific maybe introduced. So next please, just go recap about this model. So we give the open view issues of this modeling. So we like to hear more comments and suggestions from working group to see whether there's some other suggestion from the working group. That's all. Thank you.
We're out of time on this topic. It's an important one, and there's, as Yvonne put into the chat, two approaches here. Also, the notion of augmentation versus new model. These are important things that we should discuss on the list. Italo, if that's okay, we'll take it to the list. If it's critical, okay, thanks, Italo. So we're going to move on. There's some good discussion to be had, so please do have it on the list.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
All right. So I'm presenting a proposal to scale flexible algorithm to do network slicing. Next slide, please. So flexible algorithm is a flexible way to do multi-topology and network slicing. But then the problem is that with a large network and when you need many slices, it may not scale. So the controllers can help by so that the routers do not need to know the algorithm information, link information, and they do not need to do SPFs. The controllers will calculate STE paths and to steer traffic in across the network, but that may still not be enough. With the vast scale and many slices, the controllers could be overwhelmed, especially when you consider that if you have to do multicast, the controllers may also have to do a lot of calculations for multicast trees. Next slide, please. So the proposal here is we call it flexible TE because it combines a flexible algorithm and the SRTE paths. We upload the per algorithm path calculation to edge routers. And then with that, like with the controller-based approach, the internal routers do not need to maintain the information, do not need to do the calculation. And even the edge routers, they only need to know the information that they really care about. If one particular edge router does not need to know about the slice, and then it does not need to know information about the slice at all. So this idea is actually inspired from John Drake's enhanced VPN draft in the best working group. It is applied to Flex Algo, and now it becomes very efficient to distribute the relevant information using southbound BGP-LS. Next slide, please. So the key here is the use of a new route target called bitmask route target. So the controllers are configured with link administrative groups for all links. Commonly, the LAGs, I'll just refer to them as link colors, as people normally do. So the routers are not configured with that information, but only controllers are provisioned. And then the controllers will originate link NRIs and distribute using the southbound BGP-LS. Now, typically, the link color information is encoded in a bitmask in the BGP-LS attributes. But now we pull that out, we put it into this new route target, bitmask route target. The idea of the bitmask route target is that they match if the logical end of those two bitmasks is not 0. So with that, we can very efficiently distribute information only to targeted routers. For example, if you have a link with it's colored with red and blue, and the link NRI will carry a bit mask route target with 2 bits set for red and blue. And now if a router cares about red link, then it is configured with a bit mask route target with the red bit set. By doing that, the BGP route target infrastructure will make sure that that link NRI originated by the controller will only be targeted to send to the edge routers that had corresponding bits set in their local route target. So that's the idea. Next slide, please.
You're out of time, so please wrap up.
Yes, next, yeah. Similarly, the flexible algorithm definition can be done very similarly. And next slide, please. We can just skip this. Continue. Continue. So the summary, we use centralized provisioning and signaling of flexible algorithm information using this new bit mask route target. We can do the targeted distribution very efficiently, and then the those edge routers will be able to do the SGRT path calculation. So that's the basic idea. We take comments. And, yeah.
We're going to take comments on the list on this. As Pavan put into the chat, we have a number of solutions that we're looking that all fit in within the framework. I see one person in queue. I don't know if they're going to present next. Whoever's presenting this draft, please come to queue. Zhenben, are you presenting this?
No, I in fact the question for the Jeffrey. So if no time, we will not. Okay, you can drop me.
If you could just send it to the list, we really appreciate the comments, and we're sorry we're running late. As I mentioned in chat, we give sort of priority to time to working group documents and working group charter topics. So these are all new, so we're definitely squeezing them. So apologize for that.
Okay, no problem. I sent to chat. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Do we have? I thought it was going to be Ran. If they're not online, oh, here you are. Great, thank you. Please go ahead. 5 minutes or less.
That's from ZTE. Today I will do the presentation about packet network slicing using segment routing. Next, please. Yes, AI administrative instance identifier explicit virtual network identification. It could be used as TN slice identifiers. It indicates the topology, computing, storage resources of the dedicated virtual network. There are, let's say, the key feature of the AI. AI is the identifier of the dedicated virtual network for the slice. It supports the end-to-end slicing. It's an identifier for the unified NSI across multiple of transport network. AI is one of the constraint criteria of the color template, which is defined in the draft segment routing policy. And color template with AI provides a more flexible control. It's a uniform color template for overlay service mapping to underlay results. AI meets the link requirement of from 3PP. It is independent of the existing domain partitions of the network, and it is also independent of the existing underlay frame or routing technology. there is no modification to the forwarding table because in order to distinguish the forwarding behavior, the prefix state will be allocated per. Yeah, this is AI as a TN/identifier. This is an example of our solution. In figure, there are two topologies, red and blue. The red topology and blue topology includes all the nodes in the feature. That is node H1234E, and the red topology includes link H3, 13, 32, 34, 42, and 2.
Ren? I think you were having audio problems.
Air control plane and the
I cannot hear you. I don't know if others. I occasionally get garbled speech. We're actually pretty much out of time, so I think we really would like to discuss it on list. As I mentioned in Jabber, we give priority to the chartered activities. So sorry about squeezing these. We have just a few minutes left. We're going to move on. Italo?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, next slide, please. Okay, I'm Italo Busi. I'm presenting this new draft for MPLS-T topology. Next slide. Okay, history. This draft has been presented in IETF104 as MPLS-TP topology, and the feedback from the working group was that people will prefer to integrate TP capabilities into T models. There has been a lot of discussion with the T Young model authors, and the output of the discussion is that to have an MPLS-T topology, which is this draft, and to update the MPLS-T tunnel to support MPLS-TP capabilities. And we shared this output on the mailing list of both TEAS and MPLS working group a couple of weeks ago. I think you can go to slide number 4. Now, number 3 is just a recap of the original. So the solutions now is the MPLS-T topology is defined as an augmentation of the packet T topology following the approach discussed in IETF106. Next slide. Okay, for the MPLS-TP, okay, we thanks all the participants on the T Young discussions, and we describe in section 3.2 we describe exactly how the model is applicable to MPLS-TP. So for bidirectional LSP, everything is already covered by the T topology, so nothing special is needed. For ECMP, we have added an attribute to report whether the lag or a T-bundle link is performing load balancing on a per throw on a per top label. The latter option will be which will be required by MPLS-TP. The former can be used by MPLS-TE generic. For PHP, we report whether an LTP is not capable to support ultimate top popping, such that when you do pack computation for an MPLS-TP LSP, you can avoid to enter the last node from that LTP. And the GAL, we think, is outside the scope of this draft, is more related to OIM capabilities. Next slide, please. And a few open issue. The draft is currently not providing MPLS-T label augmentations to report the label set. The assumption is that label allocation is done at network elements, so they no need to report the constraints to the controller. And we assume the MPLS-T tunnels are always single domain, so no need to coordinate label allocation between two domains if there is no control plane. And we would like to validate these assumptions. And the bandwidth augmentation, the T bandwidth augmentation for MPLS are actually common to other packet T like Ethernet. So we would like to consider moving them to packet T topology and get them from an inherited from the augmentation. And even if it is a 0-0 draft, it's as the output of a long discussion. So we think the document is ready for working group adoption. At least we think we are going in the right direction based on the previous discussion. Of course, we have to still progress through the working group revision. Thank you.
to any questions for Ritlo? Guess not. Yeah, I think we have somehow managed to wrap up all the discussion. It's right.
I try to be very fast.
There was a comment from Stuart saying that next time we should just send the videos out and have questions. Yeah, we will. Yeah, we will take that into consideration. Yeah, thanks everyone. I mean, there's still lots of discussion happening on the chat. Please do take it to the list, and yeah, we'll get those addressed there. Yeah, we'll see you again in the next meeting. Thanks everyone.